Our guest today is Scott Moore, the CEO of the Invictus Games 2025 Vancouver. Previously, he was the president of Sportsnet. He's been known as one of the leading sports media personalities in Canada over the past 3 decades, with executive positions at CBC, running Hockey Night in Canada. He was the president and CEO of Uninterrupted, LeBron James media sports empire within Canada. And he has also been involved in some of the most influential sporting events around the world as an executive producer of hundreds of Olympic events, including the Beijing Olympics. Without further ado, our guest today, Scott Moore. Scott Moore, welcome to the Leadership Standard. You are the CEO of the Invictus Games 2025 Vancouver. Let's just start with what are the Invictus Games for those who don't know?
Well, the Invictus Games are about two things: gratitude and healing. I'll get into a little bit about each of those things. When I talk to people about the Invictus Games, they usually say, "Oh, that's the sort of Paralympics that Prince Harry started for wounded soldiers." I said, "Well, sort of, except it's really about using sport for its transformative power." The participants are wounded, ill, or sick veterans or service members from 23 countries from all over the world. And while we do award gold, silver, and bronze in each event, it's more about using sport as giving them purpose again, getting them through either their physical or invisible injuries. And there are amazing stories that tell you exactly what the games are. And maybe the best one I could tell you is about a young man by the name of Mark Ormrod. He competed in the Invictus Games in Toronto and in Sydney. He's a former British Marine. He stepped on a landmine in Afghanistan and lost 3 limbs. And in Sydney, he competed in swimming. So picture this: the beginning of the swimming event in Sydney, one lap of the pool, the whistle goes off to start the race, the field dives in, 30 seconds or less later, the winner hits the wall, silver, bronze, all hit the wall. And as they finished the race, they all turned back to see that Mark was about a third of the way down the pool. And because in that culture, no man is left behind, the entire field came back and swam with Mark and touched the pool wall together. And that's the spirit of the Invictus Games. We hear so often that people who have competed or participated in the games have regained their purpose. They've used it as a way of getting through their mental or physical challenges. And I tell you, as you know, I've been in the sports business and the media business for 40 years. I've never done anything more rewarding than this, and I haven't even gotten to the games yet. Every day there's an emotional story. Every day we realize that we're really changing and in some cases saving lives.
Yeah, and that's in the research that I did in the Netflix documentary, The Heart of Invictus, they spoke about this is using sport to save lives, to help in the healing process. And I really love that metaphor, which you just shared in that story about no person left behind in relation, in this case, to sports. Now, what is it that brings meaning to you in taking on this role at this stage in your career?
Well, it's funny you mentioned the Netflix series because how this all came up was I was semi-retired living in California with my wife. We were at a cocktail party for a friend in London, England for his 60th birthday. I got approached by the former head of the Conservative Party in Canada, Aaron O'Toole, former Veterans Affairs Minister. He said to me, "Scott, Invictus Games Vancouver Whistler is looking for a new CEO. Would you be interested?" I said, I'm trying to roll it back. No, I'm not really interested." He said, "Do me a favor, just watch The Heart of Invictus on Netflix." So we got back to California. Becky and I watched the first episode, and tears in our eyes, we looked at each other and said, "Okay, we're taking this opportunity." And what what it gives me personally, and my father used to always say this, that when you start to give back, you realize that by giving, you're receiving way more. And this was my chance to give a little back. I've always been in the for profit part of sport and media. And this is a nonprofit. It's very much about giving opportunities to these service members and helping them heal. And boy, that's changed me. It was funny. I was doing a board meeting yesterday with the International Games Foundation, the Invictus Games Foundation out of London, and Prince Harry was on the call. And Prince Harry was with me in Vancouver a few weeks ago for a number of events. And at the end of my presentation, he was very kind and said, "You know, I've known Scott for a few months now, and I've already seen a change in him. I've seen how these games have impacted him." And it was a great compliment. And if I could be personal for a second, I'd say that um, I lost my father a year and a half ago, and he was a great philanthropist. He gave a ton of money, but he also gave his time. And that moment when Becky and I looked at each other and said we're going to take this opportunity, I then had a call with the board the next day, and I came back after the meeting from my office, and Becky was in tears, and I said, Why are you crying?" She said, "Because the first person you would have called for advice would have been your father, and he would have been so pleased." And I said, "You know, I miss him, uh, but I don't need his advice because it's in my head. I knew what he'd say. He would say, 'Take the time to give back and do something a little bit more important than just returning EBITDA to a large corporation.'" So it's been already the most rewarding thing I've ever done.
Well, thanks for sharing that, and, I'm sorry for your loss with your father. Where I wanna go with this is when you started out in 1984 on this path in sports broadcasting, do you think it was a calling, or do you think it was a combination of, luck, opportunity? What was it about you that when you look back and like Steve Jobs says, connects you can only connect the dots backward, you ended up in this place today?
I love that phrase. I've never heard that before. Connect the dots backwards. It's so true. Um, I when I speak to college students, I always say that anyone who tells you, who has been moderately successful or more, and I put myself in the moderate area, anybody who's been successful and says that luck didn't play a part of it is wrong. They're lying. You know, every one of us has a certain amount of luck in our lives. And it's a matter of whether or not we take it. Um, it was a calling because it was a passion. You know, it has become so hackneyed to say don't go into whatever career you want to go into because of the money or because of the title. Go into it because you're passionate about it. I was passionate about sports. I grew up playing hockey. I grew up playing rugby, and hockey particularly was a huge part of my life. I wanted to be a hockey play-by-play guy. That didn't work out. I clearly didn't have the right skills for that. Got a good deep voice, but can't think on my feet as well as a play-by-play person does. But getting involved with TSN when it started in 1984, it was luck to be graduating from college just as they were starting, and just as the cable sports world was starting to unfold. Um, and then it was a lot of luck moving ahead in the business, but it's also hard work. You know, you make your own luck.
Yeah, and what do you remember from those early days at TSN where you were employee somewhere between number 10 and number 15 when you were kind of making it up as you went along and just trying to figure things out? What what was it about you that really stood out at that time?
Well, I think you hit it on the head, making it up as we went along. It's one of the real joys of my career is having launched a number of different initiatives, whether it's I was part of launching TSN in 1984, was a much bigger part of launching Sportsnet in 1998, doing the first ever Invictus Winter Games, getting a chance to do something that nobody else has ever done, where there's no playbook, where you have to make it up as you go along, where you have to be able to improvise, where you have to be able to set a vision. You and I have talked about this before, but I think there's really three steps in great leadership. And that's number one, set a vision. Number two, surround yourself with a great team. And number three, execute with integrity, not with perfection. I've argued with an old boss about number three before. He used to say you have to execute with perfection. I said nobody's going to do that. It's how you react to the imperfections. It's how you change course. And if you do it with integrity, you'll you have a far better chance of being successful. So yeah, I love the fact that I I was lucky enough to be born at a time that I just happened to be at the beginning of a lot of things in sports media and be able to do things without a roadmap.
And you went on to Sportsnet. We're skipping because you've had so many journeys along the way. And I was reading this book. My father actually gave it to me, Nick Kiprios, undrafted, and he
Oh, yeah.
mentions you uh, several times. And what he says about you in terms of leadership, because you just mentioned something we've talked about before in terms of what makes an effective leader. He said that Scott Moore is, I'm paraphrasing, is liked by pretty much everybody who was at Sportsnet that he had seen in the almost decade and a half at that time he was there. And he said that you were particularly good at finding talent. You were an advocate for talent, employees, and you had an ability to communicate at a level that he hadn't seen before, with directness, with clarity, and with a purpose. What is it about your ability to communicate that resonates with him? And I've heard it over and over again, even with my experiences with you. You have this directness, simplicity, and ability to get other people to kind of follow a path that you set. What do you think are the hallmarks of an
It,
effective communicator as a leader?
well, first of all, that's very kind of Nick to have said, and I appreciate what he said about me. The I joke that I'm a direct communicator because I'm not as bright as a lot of people. I have a tough time couching things in a lot of fancy jargon. I prefer to be relatively blunt and straightforward. But I've always believed in over communicating with the team. Something I do at Invictus Games that I've done all my career is every Friday I write a personal email to the entire staff. I don't have the communications team write it. I write it talking about our goals, our objectives, trying to point out some great work by the team. And that I did it at Sportsnet, I did it at CBC, and the reaction I get from that is that it's great to have the the leader of the organization communicate in such a direct way. It's a terrific way of getting your message out and to continually reinforce that message. I added something at Invictus that I've not done before, and that's we have a regular Monday morning stand up meeting with the entire staff. Wasn't able to do that at CBC or Sportsnet or TSN because the staff is so big and so spread out. At Invictus, we have about 90 people. They still fit in a room. The people that aren't there can be on the screen, and it's a great way of making sure that the messages get across and that the vision gets across. I try. I'm not always perfect at this, but I try to make sure, especially at the Monday morning meetings, that others on the leadership team and others get a chance to speak and talk about major initiatives. Uh, but in business today, over communication is key. And for a guy my age or a person my age who's in a leadership position, you have to find the ways to communicate with your younger staff in ways that they receive that. And I got great feedback from a woman I have on our team here named Renee Smith Valad. who worked at the 2010 Olympics. And she said, "I love your Friday email, but you need to know that not everyone in the organization reads emails, and some of them just will read the first few sentences. So you got to make sure you're communicating in other ways." So that's why we added the Monday morning meeting. I, I'm particularly pleased that that then got into a cadence of Monday morning stand up meeting where the whole group participates. Wednesday, our head of human resources puts out what we call a sit rep, which is situational awareness for our team. That's a lot of more logistical items, and then Friday is my email to the staff. And I think one of the ways you continue to have a strong team is you over communicate to them so they know what's going on and they know what the vision is.
Harry, as the founder and patron of the Invictus Games Foundation, had a FaceTime. We're talking about ways of communicating with the team with you. I think it was him and Megan with you. What was that meeting like? And what were your impressions of him as a leader the first time you met while you got together on that, what would become your role as CEO?
Yeah, they're an amazing team, and I've spent more time with Prince Harry than I have with Meghan. But what I'd say about Prince Harry is he is incredibly engaged. He's incredibly sincere about this particular cause, and I know he's got other causes, and I'm sure he's as sincere about them. But he is so sincere about this, and he does that first part of leadership that we talked about: set a great vision. He's not as operational, nor should he be. He's not the CEO. He's the patron of the games, but he sets that vision. And one of the first meetings I had with him on FaceTime, we talked about ceremonies and how important ceremonies were, not to him, but to the participants who come, the wounded, ill, and sick veterans and service members from around the world who get a chance to come out into an arena wearing their nation's colors again. If they were veterans, they haven't worn it since they were in service. And he reinforced to me and to our ceremonies producer how important it was to have a full house, and that the way you get a full house is by having great musical acts and have a great show. But he set that vision. And another thing that I quote him all the time about, it's a great quote, and he's good at condensing things to a really easy to understand set of words. He talked about how we should be treating the competitors, these service members from around the world. Um, and he was very clear. They should be treated with respect, empathy, and dignity, not sympathy. Sympathy doesn't get you a job. And that he's had more time than I have to hone that message because he's been involved in so many of these things and they're so personal. But that was that's a great line that I continue to use with people because it's easy at a games like this or a Paralympics to look at the participants, the athletes, and say, "Oh, that's a tough life they're leading." Yeah, that's nice, but doesn't get them a job. Uh, you should be looking at them with respect, with inspiration. Yeah. So yeah, he has a great way of talking about what's important. And the other thing he is amazing at, he's amazing at connecting with people. We had an event in Vancouver a couple of weeks ago where he was here. He was here for the Grey Cup, Canada's professional football championship, and that we had an event at the Seaforth Armory, which is a downtown army base in Vancouver. We brought in school kids, grade 3, grade 6, and grade 12. And he connected with each group and did it in a way that was sincere, authentic. He got the message about Invictus across. And I said to him as he sat down for the formal part of the proceedings, I said, "You know, I don't know if you get told enough, but you're really good at that. Like, you're really good at that. And you know, because you're a great connector, it's it's easier to connect with people of your own age, of your own background. Connecting with grade 3s and grade 6s may be the most difficult thing in the world." And he did it with just such authenticity and grace. It was really something to see.
Yeah, you see that with him even over the years. I mean, there's a reason he is so popular with the common folk, with people, regardless of the cultural background, nationality. He has that ease, which that it factor. Not so much he has charisma, but it's that, like you said, that groundedness about him. Uh,
The other thing I want to say about him, because it's really important. He and the Duchess Meghan had this incredibly glaring spotlight on them. You know, the media is fixated with them, and not always in a positive way. And he makes sure that every time there's a media spotlight on him, he tries his best to deflect it on to the people that matter. And as we were talking about, for instance, him doing a live interview with TSN at the Grey Cup, and he doesn't like doing live media interviews. He's not a big fan of the media for obvious reasons. But we convinced him to do it. But he said, I'm only doing it if we have a participant from Team Canada with me, because it's not all about me. And one of the criticisms that he and Megan get that I find so unfair around these games is that it's all about them. The pictures, the coverage, it's all about them. Well, it's not. It's we make sure the participant is at the center of everything we do. But some of the media are more interested in taking pictures of the Duke and Duchess and what they're wearing that particular day. And if they had it their way, they wouldn't allow pictures of them. They would only allow pictures of the participants. But they are smart enough, obviously, to know that when the media is there looking at them, they can deflect it on to what's really important. They can't always succeed, especially with the British media, but they do a great job of making sure that if there's the spotlight, they're either sharing it or deflecting it.
One more point on this before we move to the end of our conversation. Uh, you talked about a First Nation term, a blanket, and how that became in your mind, in the hearts and the vision, as part of the vision for Invictus, an important symbol. So what I want to ask you is, what does that term mean in context to Invictus and why it matters? And the second part of that question, Scott, is, can you talk about when you, Harry, Megan, and maybe a very few other people went to a First Nations reserve or a First Nations community, without press, and what that meant from your perspective?
Well, first of all, you've done your research. Secondly, that's a great opportunity for me to talk about the important partnership that the Invictus Games 2025 has with the four founding First Nations of the Lower Mainland in BC. These games were created with them, they were bid with them, they're being organized with them on my board, with them on our team, and everything we do is through a couple of lenses. The first being what's great for the participants, and the second, how do we use these games to advance the goals of truth and reconciliation. So the blanketing thing is a tradition out here, and I think it's a tradition of First Nations across the country. And just a quick aside that as a guy growing up in Ontario, sadly, we don't have enough connection with First Nations. And when you come out to BC, that connection is so much stronger, and I've learned so much. But there's this beautiful tradition with the First Nations here of blanketing their visitors or their loved ones, and it's as simple as draping a blanket over them and saying, "This is a symbol of our love and support and protection." We have a young woman who works with us on our team, our First Nations advisor, who reports to me that this wonderful idea of that on the first night of the games, having a blanket for each competitor and making sure that they are blanketed. So that's going to be a beautiful piece. Now, the other thing that you need to know is that the Duke and Duchess have taken a real interest in the First Nations and their causes. And we had a lovely lunch at the Musqueam First Nations a couple of weeks ago where It was just the four chiefs, myself, and a few others. And he said, we really want to use the spotlight of Invictus to put a spotlight on the First Nations and how we can help their journey of healing, uh, which is so important. And the event you spoke about, but we did it in February. We visited a First Nations community in Lillooet, uh, and it was just the Duke, the Duchess, a few of us, no media, and we went to play wheelchair basketball with some local youth, and it was an amazing event because there was no pomp and circumstance to it. It was just we showed up and we played wheelchair basketball with these kids, and the smiles on their faces uh, were amazing, and they got a chance to interact with the Duke and Duchess in an incredibly casual way, and like everything else I've done with them, they were incredibly sincere about it. Now, I want to tell the one story that I'm on the other team with, from Harry, and I got the ball, and I looked up, and there's the prince barreling down on me and crashed straight into me, knocked the ball out from my lap, almost knocked me out of the chair, and he said, "Welcome to Invictus." It was a lovely moment. But as we left that community, the smiles on those kids' faces were it was worth the trip, by a long shot.
I love that. I love that, and that on so many levels, that shows they're willing to take their time to explore communities separate from the spotlight. I love their action speaks so loud, it didn't matter what they were saying. It was the actions that mattered, that showed their true character. Scott, this is a community in tech, in Vistage, of 30,000 CEOs, key executives. You were gracious enough to one time come on a session that I was doing as a guest speaker, as a special guest speaker of mine. Uh, what would you like from these individuals who, on another project that you helped me with, you called small and mid-sized business owners the backbone of Canada? What would you like the message to be to them as they're listening and watching this about how they can help on different levels the upcoming Invictus Games in Vancouver?
My message to CEOs, small, medium, sized business owners and big business owners is one of our goals here is to create two things: a financial legacy that will help wounded, ill, and sick veterans with a number of issues. Veteran suicide is a major issue that needs to get tackled. Veterans employment transition is really important. So we want to leave a financial legacy to help with programs for that. But as important, if not more important, we want to leave a legacy of gratitude. Too often, particularly in Canada, our our service members in the armed forces are invisible to us. We don't think about them. Uh, we don't thank them. We're not even aware of half of what they're doing. Uh, and these are people that are putting themselves in harm's way, whether it's in foreign countries or whether it's fighting wildfires in Canada. So one of those things that we want to make sure is when we have our opening ceremonies on February 8th at BC Place in Vancouver, that there are 45,000 people in the stands, literally blanketing the competitors as they come in and and giving us a chance to say thank you. I talk about the circle of inspiration uh, on the games that will be inspired by what the competitors are doing. They'll do amazing things on the field, but they'll be inspired by the fact that we're in the stands thanking them. So if I had a message to the CEOs, I'd say encourage your staff to come out to the games, to watch them on TSN CTV or on YouTube, to buy some merchandise, but most importantly to show up because when you fill a seat at the Invictus Games, you're doing something more than just attending a sporting event. You're saying thank you. Your cheers are validation for the participants that what they do matters and that they're seen and that they're appreciated. So I'd like these games to leave that legacy that we think a little bit more about the people that are serving us and protecting our way of life.
And Scott, where can we find out more information about how we can support the Invictus Games?
Yeah, easy. Go to our website, invictusgames2025.ca. You can buy tickets. You can buy merchandise. You can donate. One of the things about the games is we have a charitable partner, True Patriot Love, who are the people that got the games originally. They are Canada's military foundation. We are committed to leaving a minimum of $5 million in legacy funds. We'd love to make that $6-7 million. And I'm really pleased, by the way, to say that we're on track to do that. We have a $60 million budget. We have 30 million that came from the province of BC, the federal government. The rest has come from corporate sponsorships and individuals. The scope of the game changed. It got bigger, but we didn't go back to the government for a single extra penny because my background is in the private sector. You don't get to go back and ask for more money from the government. You go out and find that money, and we did that. And I'm pleased to say that we're on track to leave probably about a $6 million, maybe more legacy. And every dollar that comes into us from here on in will go to support that legacy. So our website, invictusgames2025.ca, would love you to get involved as part of that legacy of gratitude.
That's so inspiring, and we'll make sure that in the show notes, we have that information and have a link if you want to participate, to give back, to support it in some capacity. Scott, thank you so much for your time today. I know you've got a million things going on and you found time to speak with us. And thank you for the work you're doing. It's really, like we said at the beginning, using sport as a social purpose to save lives.
Thanks, Jamie. It was a real pleasure. Great to see you again.
Pleasure to see you. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning into this episode of the Leadership Standard Podcast, brought to you by Tech Canada. Tech Canada's proven process of peer advisory groups, one-to-one executive coaching, thought leadership from subject matter experts, and national and global networks all provide a lasting impact. Not just on your business, but on your life. Your ability to deal with fast-paced change will accelerate. Your decision-making will become more decisive. You'll be a better leader. Learn more at tec-canada.com. Keep leading with excellence, and see you next time on the Leadership Standard Podcast.